Hello everybody, this is Dan Trotter, Pretty Good Bible Studies. The video you are about to see is an explanation of 5 key symbols of the book of Revelation from an orthodox preterist viewpoint. This video is one of a series of videos explaining the book of Revelation, all of which are in my playlist on orthodox preterism. I hope you enjoy it. Now, to get you oriented in this series, in case this is the first video you've tuned into, above my head you will see an outline of the entire Revelation PowerPoint that I am going through in this video series. I started out with a brief introduction, number 1 of the book of Revelation, and then I talked about the telltale time indicators in the book. How many times did John say, or Jesus say, I am coming soon, I am coming soon, and the end is near, the time is near? This indicates that the book was predicting events in AD 70, not at the end of the world. Now, the third part of this PowerPoint presentation is concerning the major symbols in the book of Revelation. My theory is that if we can understand the basic symbols, the rest will be details, and we'll be on the downhill slide. Admittedly, the book of Revelation is not easy, but I think that once we get these major symbols out of the way, the rest of the book we can tackle. Now, I've got 11 in my outline up there. I've changed my mind. I'm going to do 4 more. We're going to do 15 altogether. And the last video in the Revelation series, which is all the videos are part of my Orthodox Preterist playlist, I'm going to talk about the establishment of the New Covenant, because the book of Revelation is not merely about AD 70, it's also about the culmination of the New Covenant. AD 70 was the beginning of the New Covenant. The end of the world, the final state, is the glorious end of the New Covenant. We'll talk about that a little bit too at the end of the book. So right now, let's start out with the first symbol I want to talk about today, the 6th that I'm going all together, the great red dragon in Revelation 12, verses 7 through 17. Now, let me read Revelation 12:3 to you. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads 7 diadems. Diadems is another word for crowns, which shows power and rulership. The great red dragon, there's no question about this symbol. I started out with this one today because this is the easy one. This refers to Satan. He's a symbol of Satan. Revelation 12:9, John tells us explicitly. Now, most of the symbols in the book of Revelation we have to interpret, but this one we don't, because John tells us straight out. Would that he would have done that with all the symbols, but he didn't. Revelation 12:9 says this, and the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan. Now, what does the 7 heads of the dragon refer to? It refers to Daniel 7's 4 world empires. Now, if you're going to understand eschatology, you have to learn Daniel 7. And Daniel 7 is not that difficult, actually. There's not a lot of controversy about it amongst conservative interpreters. There's 4 beasts there. The first beast is a lion, Babylon. He has 1 head. The second beast that's referred to that succeeds the lion is the bear, the Medo-Persian Empire. That bear has 1 head for a total of 2 heads. And then along comes a leopard, who succeeds the bear. The leopard stands for Alexander the Great. Now, this leopard had 4 heads. Well, the 4 heads stood for the famous Diadochi, the 4 successor generals to Alexander the Great. We'll talk about that when we get to the book of Daniel. Add 4 to the previous 2, we got 6 heads, and then, of course, the dreadful beast, the last beast, the monstrous beast, which was Rome. It had 1 head, 7 heads. The idea behind this is that the devil, the great red dragon, is the power animating these 4 ancient world empires. These empires were not nice places. They had enough common grace to exist. They had enough justice to exist, but it was a cruel, hard world. All you have to do is watch movies about the ancient Roman Empire to see that. I would have hated to have lived in these empires. Now, another part of the symbol of the great red dragon is his 10 horns. Now, these 10 horns are also relatively easy to interpret it. In the book of Daniel, the 4th beast, which refers to the Roman Empire, it also had 10 horns. It also had 10 toes. And the 10 horns and the 10 toes represented the 10 provinces of Rome. Pannonia, Dacia, and I forgot the other 8, but they're very famous, easy to locate in history. So, we see here that we have a great red dragon and that he is intimately tied with the Roman Empire. And this goes along with the theme of the book of Revelation, namely that there are 2 persecuting entities of the church, the Roman Empire and apostate Israel, and the church is going to overcome these 2 enemies because John is writing a book of encouragement to the Christians. They are going to overcome. Now, let's go to our second symbol that we're going to take up in this video. The woman in the wilderness, Revelation 12, 1 through 17. Let me read verses 4b through 5. And the dragon, that's the same red dragon that we just talked about in the previous slide. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. She gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron, but her child was caught up to God and to his throne. Now we're going to see that this symbol is not hard to interpret. Verse 1 in Revelation 12 describes the woman. She was a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. Now I used to puzzle over this. I thought this was a strange description of the woman. But if we go back to the Old Testament, we'll see that the woman represents Israel. Now, not only does she represent Israel, she represents New Israel too, the old Israel people of God and the New Israel people of God, the church. Let's start out with the old Israel first. The sun and the moon and the 12 stars is a typical symbol of Israel. It comes from the famous story when Jacob had his dream about his brothers. You recall the dream where it got his brothers jealous. Let's read Genesis 37, verse 9 first. Joseph is speaking. He says, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me, bowing down to Joseph. He's describing the dream to his father. Pretty naive, pretty foolish, but that's what he was doing. And Jacob responded and said this, and I want you to compare the yellow with yellow, the pink with pink, and the blue with blue. Jacob says this in Genesis 37:10, shall I, Jacob, and your mother, Rachel, and your brothers, the patriarchs of Israel, the leaders of the 12 tribes of Israel, indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you? So there you have it. The sun, yellow, refers to I, Jacob. The moon, blue, refers to the mother, who is Rachel. And the stars, pink, refer to the brothers, the patriarchs, the leaders of the 12 tribes of Israel. So you see here the woman is representative of the old Israel. Now she gave birth to the Messiah. And if you think about it, in the old Israel, that's where Jesus was, and he was born under that system, under the old Israel. Verse 5 of chapter 12 says this, a male child who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. Again, that obviously refers to Jesus. Who else is going to rule the nations with a rod of iron? That does not mean, by the way, a rod to beat each other to beat somebody like they were a slave, but it's a symbol, a scepter of authority, like an iron scepter. And if you recall, in a previous video, I pointed out to you that somewhere, and I forgot the verse right now, in the book of Revelation, that the church is also said to rule the nations with a rod of iron. So Jesus and his church are closely identified as having authority, victory. All right, Revelation verse 5, the same verse says this, her child was caught up to God and his throne. That obviously refers to Jesus and his ascension. And then in verse 4, the previous verse, it says the devil tried to devour her child. The devil hates Jesus and tries to kill him. Still talking about the woman in the wilderness. I said that she represented Israel, both old and new. Well, now let's look how she represents the new Israel. First of all, she fled into the wilderness, Revelation 12, 6 and 14. Now, if you recall from the Olivet Discourse, the Christians saw Jerusalem surrounded by armies that caused desolation, the so-called abomination of desolation. And Jesus told them to flee when they saw that. They couldn't flee because Cestius Gallus, the Roman army who was besieging Israel, had surrounded the city with armies, and how could the Christians flee? But the zealots inside Jerusalem, first of all, Cestius Gallus inexplicably withdrew from the city, and the zealots inside the city went to chase him. Now, two obstacles that prevented the Christians from fleeing at that time were removed. Cestius Gallus was gone, the Roman guy was gone, and the crazy zealot Jews inside the city who wouldn't let anybody escape because they wanted everybody there to establish the Messianic kingdom when the Messiah came to beat the Romans, they were gone chasing Cestius. And so the Christians were sitting there in Jerusalem. They knew what to do. They got out of town and they went to Pella. They fled to the wilderness, just as John says here in Revelation 12:6. The woman went to the wilderness. Now the woman stayed there for 3.5 years till the end of the war, safe. Now in verse 17, this Revelation says that the devil waged war with her offspring. Now, who are the offspring of the woman? Well, we know the first offspring, the male child, was Jesus. Well, Jesus has brothers, right? She has other offspring, the brothers of Jesus. These offspring who hold to the testimony of Jesus. The devil is said to wage war with those offspring who hold to the testimony of Jesus. In other words, the devil not only tries to kill Jesus, he tries to destroy Jesus' church, because Jesus the head and Jesus the body are closely joined together in intimate union, and the devil hates us. So this is a pretty clear symbol. Now let's go to the third symbol in this video, the 8th overall, which I'm going to cover. And this is the sea beast of Revelation 13:1 through 8. Let me read Revelation 13:1. And I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads and 10 diadems on its horns and blasphemous names on its head. Now you will notice the 7 heads and the 10 diadems. This is very similar to these imagery of the red dragon. And there's a purpose for that, because the sea beast is going to be intimately identified with that red dragon, the devil. The sea beast refers to the Roman Empire. Remember, the Roman Empire is one of the 2 persecuting kingdoms in Revelation. And here is one of the major symbols of the Roman Empire. It operates in the power of Satan because it has 7 heads. That identifies it with the devil, who had 7 heads, those 7 heads being identified with the 4 ancient kingdoms who were persecuting the people of God. And here the 7 heads not only identify the sea beast with the devil, with the red dragon, but also identify the sea beast with Rome, because you know the famous 7 hills of Rome, the Palatine, the Capitoline, the Aventine, and there's 4 others that I can't remember, but they're very famous hills. And then, of course, this sea beast had 10 diadems, 10 crowns on its, that should say 10 diadems, not 10 heads. I made a mistake, so sorry. In the PowerPoints, 10 diadems. This refers to the 10 provinces of the Roman Empire. And I used to know those 10 provinces. I can't remember them now. I remember Pannonia, Dacia, Italy, Achaia. They can easily be located in history. So the sea beast is the Roman Empire. Now, in Revelation 13:1, John says, I saw a beast rising out of the sea. What does that word sea mean? Sea is a standard prophetic symbol. Futurists and preterists agree on this. It represents the restless masses of society who are usually unruly and lawless. In other words, the Gentiles, the rebellious Gentiles. Here's a couple of verses from the Old Testament that show this. Isaiah 57:20. The wicked are like the troubled sea when it cannot rest, whose waters cast up mire and dirt. So the sea refers to all the wicked. Revelation 17:15 says this, and the angel said to me, to John, the waters that you saw where the prostitute is seated are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. That phrase, peoples and multitudes and nations and languages, those are the Gentiles. Those are the nations of the Roman Empire. And the waters that this whore of Babylon, we'll talk about her in a later video, those waters, the seas, refer to all the many, many peoples of the world. So that's a common prophetic symbol the beast rising out of the sea. The sea beast is the Roman Empire rising out of the sea from amongst all the Gentile nations of the world. The Roman Empire, in fact, what a perfect way to describe the Roman Empire. Peoples and multitudes and nations and languages, because they weren't just Romans. They were Syrians, they were Jews, they were North Africans, they were everybody. Germans, English, all kinds of people in the Roman Empire. All right, moving along with our discussion of the sea beast, we go to verses 2 and 3 of Revelation 13. And the beast was like a leopard, its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. So here, 3 more beasts are mentioned. Now, if you'll notice, these 3 beasts are the same beast that are the 3 predecessor ancient kingdoms to the Roman Empire. So the Roman Empire is in this verse here, Revelation 13, 2 and 3, the Roman Empire is seen to be the culmination of all the ancient empires, all of which were animated by Satan. Babylon is the lion, mentioned in Daniel 7, mentioned in Revelation 13, 13:2. The Medo-Persian Empire is the bear, that was mentioned in Daniel 7. It's also mentioned in Revelation 13:2. And the leopard, Revelation 13:2, and in Daniel 7 refers to Greece, namely Alexander the Great. So you have the same 3 world powers mentioned in connection with Rome, because those 3 animals in Daniel 7 were immediately preceded the monstrous beast, which was Rome. And here we have the 3 animals, the 3 ancient empires preceding the sea beast of Revelation, which is Rome. So this is Rome. So now we're tied down. We've identified what the sea beast is, and we can now interpret verse 3, which says one of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed. What does this refer to? Well, when in the Roman Empire, what did the Roman Empire before AD 70 have a mortal wound? It's very easy. You go to the so-called year of 4 emperors. It was actually a little bit more than a year. The Emperor Nero died in 68, he committed suicide. From 68 to December 69, the empire was in total turmoil, civil war. There were 4 generals fighting. The first was Galba, the second was Otho, the third was Vitellius, I think his name was, and the last was Vespasian. Now, this period was so chaotic that many, many people looked at the Roman Empire and says, she's gone, she's history, she's over, she's not going to make it. It looked like she was dead. It looked like she seemed to have a mortal wound, as John says in Revelation 13:3. She seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed. When was the mortal wound healed? When Vespasian restored order to the empire and continued the empire. Now let's look at Revelation 13:3 and 8, still looking at the sea beast. These scriptures say that the whole earth, and I'm going to translate that land, perfectly legitimate. Gay means earth or land, depending on the context, and I believe that this is the context is talking about the kingdom of Israel, the apostate kingdom of Israel. The whole land marvel as they follow the beast, and all who dwell on the land will worship it. Now we're going to look at a phenomenon in history that is not noted too often, is the fact that the Jews longed for the authority of the Roman Empire and did everything they could to suck up to it and to bow down to it. And I'll carry that theme here. The whole land marveled as they followed the beast. The whole land of Israel marveled as they followed the Roman Empire. And all who dwelt on the land of Israel will worship the Roman Empire. Does that interpretation hold up? I think you'll see that it does. First of all, we know from history that Israel sold its soul to the Roman Empire, and Herod the Great is a good example. He, of course, was in cahoots with the Romans. He was good friends with Julius Caesar, and then when Caesar went down, he was good friends with Mark Antony, which was, if I remember the story correctly, but he was always on the side of the Romans. He built the city of Caesarea, which is still there, and he named it after Caesar. Caesar. Antonia, the famous fortress, military fortress in the temple precincts, It was named after his good buddy Mark Antony. And if you look at a map of Israel at the time of Jesus, most of the names are not Hebrew, they're Roman, because Israel had sold out to the Romans. And then, of course, there's this famous verse in John 19:15. Pontius Pilate looked at the chief priest and said, "Do you want me to crucify your king? Shall I crucify your king?" Now, he was being sarcastic. Jesus was standing there with a crown of thorns, blood dripping down his face, flogged, whip marks all over him. He didn't look like a king. And so Pilate is being a little bit sarcastic, and he says, "You want me to crucify your king?" How did they answer? They said, "We have no king but Caesar." And that's true. They had no king but Caesar. They killed the king of the universe. They killed the Son of God so that they could suck up and acknowledge that they had no king but Caesar. The same kings who demanded divine worship. You had to pinch incense to them, remember? They were idolatrous, but the Jews followed the pagan Roman empires before they would follow the Son of God. The Roman Empire exercised authority and made war on the saints, the Christians, for 42 months, as we just read in Revelation 13, verse 5. Because the Roman Empire under Nero persecuted the church from mid-November 64 to June of 68, which is exactly 42 months between the start and the end. Now, let me say, I have not independently confirmed these dates. I think I got those dates from Hank Hanegraaff's Preterist novel. I did a brief check on the internet to try to narrow the dates down closer, and I haven't been able to do it yet. If anybody wants to leave me a comment to give me some more precise information on when the persecution started, we know when it ended because we know when Nero died. Please leave me a comment. I'd like to know. But whatever the exact amount is, I don't worry about that too much because 42 months is a symbolic period of time. It means death and destruction because it's equal to 3.5 years, as we'll see in a minute. 3.5 years is a symbol that means death, desolation, famine, persecution, and disaster. Now, 1,260 days also has that same meaning because it's equal to 3.5 years. But if we're talking about 1,260 days, we don't try to get the period down to a day because it's symbolic. Likewise, I don't think we need to get the 42 months down to an exact month. Perhaps it can be done, perhaps it cannot be. But the point is for approximately 3.5 years, Nero persecuted the saints. The King James has, he wore out the saints. He made war on the saints, as the ESV has it. And that fits the preterist interpretation here of Revelation just perfectly. Now, notice also that authority was given, and this is in verse 7, authority was given it, the beast, over every tribe and people and language and nation. When you see tribe and people and language and nation, that refers to the Roman Empire. They were full of tribes and peoples and languages and nations. It was a polyglot empire full of all kinds of ethnic groups. It was the whole known world at the time. There were not only Italians in the Roman Empire, there were Britons, and there were Germans, and there were North Africans, and there were Syrians, there were Hungarians, there were all kinds of people. There were Gauls. So that's a perfect description of the Roman Empire. The sea beast had authority over all these people. Next, we'll look at the land beast. Now, the land beast is also written about in Revelation 13, and to give you a preview here, the land beast stands for Israel. We got the sea beast and the land beast in Revelation 13, the two persecuting kingdoms that persecuted the people of Christ. Now, as I said, it represents Israel, one of the two persecuting kingdom. Israel is the land. Revelation 13:11, then I saw another beast rising out of the land. The land, an automatic and idiomatic expression for the kingdom of Israel. When you hear the land, gay, the land. And so John sees a beast rising out of the land. He saw a beast rising out of Israel. Revelation 13:12, the next verse says, the beast makes the land, Israel, and its inhabitants worship the first beast. This fits in with the same idea, the same theme which I just talked about, which is that the Jews did everything they could to worship the Roman Empire, to suck up to it, to bow down to it, to give their authority to it, to receive their authority from it. This land beast made the land and its inhabitants worship the first sea beast, the Roman Empire. Now, the land beast is intimately tied with the sea beast. He exercised the authority of the sea beast, as verse 12 tells us in Revelation 13. He makes the land worship and make an image of the sea beast in Revelation 13, 12, and 14. And he causes all in the land to receive the mark of the sea beast, all in the land of Israel to receive the mark of the sea beast. In other words, and a mark shows that something belongs to you. You put your mark on it. All of the Jews belonged to the Romans. The Romans had them. The Romans received idolatrous worship from the Jews who were supposed to be worshiping Yahweh and who should have received Yahweh's Son, Jesus Christ. All right, now this land beast is also known as the false prophet. He looked like a lamb but spoke as a dragon. Revelation 13:11. In other words, he was deceptive. Spoke as a dragon, that's referring, he spoke from Satan. The land beast is specifically identified as the false prophet. We go to Revelation 19:20 to see this, and we read there, and the sea beast was captured, and with it the false prophet. The false prophet was captured along with the sea beast. And so we know from context the false prophet is the land beast, so the sea beast and the land beast were conquered together. This false prophet, this land beast, who in the sea beast's presence had deceived those who would receive the mark of the sea beast. Again, false prophet, he was leading Israel astray to make them worship the idolatrous Romans instead of Yahweh. Revelation 16:13, and I saw coming out of the mouth of the dragon and out of the mouth of the sea beast and out of the mouth of the false prophet 3 unclean spirits like frogs. Now here we have the devil, the Romans, and the Jews, the apostate Jews, all tied together. And again, this fits the theme of the book of Revelation, which is you got the devil animating 2 persecuting kingdoms whose goal was to destroy the male child, the Messiah, and the male child's offspring, brethren, the church. So the dragon is Satan. Out of the mouth of the dragon is Satan, and then out of the mouth of the sea beast, that's the Roman Empire, then out of the mouth of the false prophet, that's the land beast. The devil, Rome, and Israel. Key theme in Revelation. Don't forget that one. Now let's move along. Still talking about the land beast. The land beast caused Israel to worship the Roman Empire. For example, in verse 15, the land beast caused Israel to make an image or an idol of the sea beast. Well, when you make an idol of something, you worship it. And that's what the Jews were doing to the Romans, worshiping the Romans. According to David Chilton, a very famous theologian, a very learned theologian, who was a preterist, orthodox preterist when he wrote this. Some people say he went over to the dark side and became an heretical preterist when he died. I don't know. I don't really care. I know when he wrote this, he sounded like he knew what he was talking about. He said that Jews sometimes killed Christians who didn't submit to Rome. He said that the image of the beast might cause those who would not Chilton, this is John in Revelation 13:15 said this, the image of the beast might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. In other words, the land beast is going to kill Christians who do not submit to worshiping the Roman beast, the sea beast. And according to Chilton, that happened when that actually happened when Jews would sometimes kill Christians who didn't bow down to Rome properly. Now, this land beast caused Israel to receive the mark of the sea beast in order to eat. Revelation 13:16, also it, the land beast, causes all to be marked on the right hand or forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark. This is the famous mark of the beast, which futurists have drilled into our heads all our lives, that it's going to be a computer chip put under our skin so the government can control us and they won't turn the switch and give us any credit so we can buy food because they're controlling us with the chip under our skin, and all this absolute, utter nonsense. That is not what this verse is talking about. What it's referring to is a mark. A mark refers to ownership. And what he's saying is, look, you've got to be marked on your right hand to show that you have the right to buy and sell to the Romans or to buy and sell, period. The Romans will not give you the right to buy and sell and to make your livelihood unless you're submitted to the Romans. According to Chilton, synagogues would actually organize economic boycotts of Christians in order to force them to submit to Rome. The mark showed ownership. So this famous mark of the beast just shows that the Jews were owned by the Romans. And to emphasize that point, I want to mention again this famous verse. Pontius Pilate asked the chief priest, "Do you want me to crucify your king?" In John 19:15, the chief priest answered, "We have no king but Caesar." Acts 17:5-7, this is on Paul's second journey. The Jews at Thessalonica started shouting. There are all of Paul's mission folks, all the Christians there doing the work. They are all acting against the decrees of Caesar, saying that there is another king, Jesus. The decrees of Caesar are more important than King Jesus. All right, now let's look at the last symbol that I'm going to take up in this PowerPoint. It's the 3.5 years. Now, there's other ways of expressing it. The scripture sometimes calls it 42 months. Sometimes it calls the period 1,260 days. Sometimes it says times, time, and half a time. All of them refer to 3.5 years. Well, what's the symbolism? The symbolism, as I've said earlier, it refers to a limited period of triumphant wickedness, apostasy, judgment, desolation, destruction, woe, famine, bad stuff. It's half of the divine number 7. 7 symbolizes perfection, completion, divinity, if you will, godliness. 3.5 is half of that, which means it's not there. It's worse. Now, here's some examples in Revelation. The holy city was trampled by the nations for 42 months in Revelation 11:2. The holy city is Jerusalem. It was besieged by the Roman Empire for 3.5 years, roughly, during the Jewish War. So there's a tie to that symbolic term and a tie to the kingdom of Jerusalem, apostate kingdom of Jerusalem. The woman who was nourished in the wilderness that we talked about earlier, how long was she nourished in the wilderness? For 1,260 days. How long was the Christian church nourished in Pella, protected there while the Jewish war was going on and Jerusalem was being destroyed? 3.5 years, the length of the Jewish war. The sea beast made war on the Christian saints for 42 months. Revelation 13:5-7 says that the sea beast was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months to make war on the saints. Nero persecuted the church for 3.5 years, from 64 to 68. So 3.5 years is judgment, persecution. That's why John uses that number so often. Now, here's some examples outside the book of Revelation showing the number refers to judgment. Daniel 12:7, and I heard the man clothed in linen. He raised his right hand and his left hand toward heaven and swore by him who lives forever that it would be for a time, times, and half a time. That's 3.5 years. And that when the shattering of the power of the holy people comes to an end, all these things will be finished. What's the shattering of the power of the holy people? That's the shattering of the power of the Jews, the holy people. They actually weren't holy, but they were called holy, the so-called holy people. The power of the Jews came to an end when the 3.5 years of the Jewish war was over. That was it. James 5:17, Elijah prayed fervently that it might not rain, and for 3 years and 6 months it did not rain on the earth. A period of famine and drought, 3.5 years. The symbolism is pretty clear when you compare Scripture with Scripture. All right, I'm finished with the symbols of this video. The next video, we're going to do 5 more symbols, and the first one is the world famous 666. So if you're interested in that, please stay tuned. Subscribe to my channel on the button below if you so desire. And I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.